So many of my friends, and me included, we are all on some sort of weight loss drug, GLP-1 or whatever the other mechanisms are. I happen to be a type 1 diabetic and was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And so while weight loss was a primary goal, I was prescribed Wegovy for type 2 diabetes. And my blood sugar has been perfect since I've been on Wegovy. Perfect. I'm in range like 94% of the time. My A1C is down to like a 5.2, which is hovering around non-diabetics. So it works for me on multiple levels, but I also have been able to lose some weight. Worry, though, in our society, if having this tool and maybe misusing this tool is leading us to another era of very easy body dysmorphia.
I think that we absolutely are headed for, or already are knee deep, neck deep into another wave of way too skinny being the norm. I also am on a GLP-1 and I have been prescribed it for blood sugar for type 2 diabetes. And also, I'm 1,000% on it because I want to lose weight. So I'm just going to be real upfront about this.
But why do
I
we?
love the part about it that I get to lose weight on it because I have been battling weight my whole life. My whole life.
It's interesting, though, how the connotation is that if we have an eating disorder like anorexia, bulimia, and we lose weight because of that, or I had a significant weight loss after a bad breakup, and that was because I stopped eating for months. And I had heart palpitations, I was losing my hair. It was very unhealthy. But we have a different connotation for that kind of eating disorder than we do for the weight loss drugs.
Well, I think we haven't qualified yet that the weight loss drugs can be a part of disordered eating. I mean, right now, because it's so easily accessible and it's like the miracle that obese people like myself have been looking for, that it feels like a gift. And I don't think we've spent very much time as a culture talking about the flip side of that, which is that it can also lead not only to disordered eating in people who are using it, but also into dysmorphia for people who are not using it but think that they should be as thin as the people who are abusing it.
So I'm going to take a bit of a medical excursion right now and talk about obesity as a medical condition. So if obesity were failure of will or weak character or sweet tooth, any of those, if they were actually any of those things, we wouldn't have obese animals because animals aren't assigned those kinds of character flaws. But we do. We have obese dogs. We have obese cats. And it's because it's a metabolic disorder. It's not because of any kind of failing of that person. So I just want to put that on the record right now, that's the basis of the conversation that we're going to have. So this medical treatment wasn't a miracle drug that helps obese people not be obese anymore. It's a medical drug that helps a medical condition, which really is the point of pharmaceuticals.
Okay, so I have a question for you since you brought that up. I wonder, like, can you qualify, like, if we have obese dogs and obese cats, that's because of the people.
No.
If we had like obese frogs and obese elephants and like I mean elephants are big anyway, but if we had obese horses, well I guess horses are also kind of domesticated. If we had wild animals that were obese, then we could completely call it a medical issue. But I'm really struggling with just turning that over to solely a medical issue when the animals that are obese are also human fed.
So I can
Horses
agree with
and
that, but
dogs and cats.
yes, it might be because of the humans, but it could be for the same reason that humans can be obese, and that is because we have ample access to food. So if metabolically we don't metabolize food as quickly and we have access to food and we still have that hunger drive and we have anything we want to eat, I think that is a flaw of our society, not of that one particular person's metabolism. And
Yeah.
two, because the food we eat is so processed and it's made with things that are not meant for wild animals, right? We're no longer wild animals. We process our food so much and we put in all these chemicals that aren't good for us, that maybe affect our metabolism in a way that a frog's metabolism is not affected because their food's not processed in any way. So dogs, cats eat processed food. Elephants don't as much. You give your hay to the horses, but you don't really give them food processed in a plant that's got all these chemicals and additives in it. So I would say that's my answer to that.
So that's a combination then of the environment, which is processed foods that we've become accustomed to, and I would say that the processed food is easier to access and it's cheaper. So we're not really incentivized to eat foods that are not processed. And on top of that, the processed food is addictive in a way that whole foods don't tend to be. And so you almost even can't say that, well, if you just made the right choices, if you stayed away from processed food, then you'd be just fine, because there's a huge addictive component to processed food, and processed food is easier to get and cheaper.
But I think there's so many pieces of it. There's one, there's processed food. Two, there's the addiction to the processed food, the sugars and the simple sugars. There's three, there is the availability of food, the excess availability of food. But I would say that there's another piece of it, and that's what I was trying to get at, was that it's not a character flaw or even any of those three things alone. It's all of that plus all of this metabolic and this satiety, being sated by meals that we don't fully understand. So as an example, my two dogs have food ad lib. They have food all day long. It's out in the world, and they're not obese. They have access to all of the food. It's all processed. It's whatever they want to eat. They like it, but they're not obese because there's something in their metabolism that we don't yet understand that does not drive them to either drive that addiction or that metabolic or that lack of ability to be sated. They don't have that. So it's not an automatic thing that if you have access to all the food in the world and it's processed and you form an addiction, that's not an automatic route to obesity. There's something else that's contributing to it. That's not a character flaw.
Yes, and I think that that's exactly, I just wanted to make sure we put all those other things on the table, but then yes, the thing that I want to get at today is that there is a metabolic component that is outside of our control. I think the conversation around obesity has been problematic for a really long time. At least when we were kids, the entire conversation around obesity was that it was the fault of the person who is obese. And if it was a child, then it was the fault of the parents for overfeeding their child. And it was almost like a little bit of a dodge a bullet if a parent could put a medical issue on why their kid is obese, because it well, it's because of this and that and the other thing, kind of felt a little bit like, ooh, dodge that bullet. Because if I couldn't put a medical label on it, then it was my fault. Or if it was me putting food in my mouth and I couldn't put a label on it, then it was my fault. And when you grow up in that culture, it's really, really, really hard to ever get to a point where you stop blaming yourself for obesity. So my particular history, I was, I don't know how to say, I was not a fat child, but I was also not a skinny child. I always had curves, like from the very minute I hit puberty, I was curvy. And that was not okay in the 80s. Like, stick skinny was the norm. I remember having a conversation with one of my parents' friends, and I was saying, I would really like to get into television someday. I want to do, I wanted to be on Entertainment Tonight, which, like, right now seems ridiculously stupid. But back in the day, I either wanted to be on Entertainment Tonight or I wanted to be one of the backup roller skaters for the Donnie and Marie show. I wanted to be on TV. And the adults that I was talking to said, you're going to have to lose a lot of weight, kid, if you want to be on television. And I was a typical weight at the time, but I was not skinny enough to be on TV. And that was one of multiple things that sort of sent me into this lifelong spiral of trying to lose weight. And I have been through all of the things if there's a weight loss program or disorder on the planet, I had it. I started off in college with an eating disorder. I wanted to be anorexic, which is pathetic, but I didn't have the willpower to restrict my eating. And so I kind of went the bulimia route because I did have the ability to do that. And then once I did some healing work from that, and decided that straight up restricting food was not I was never going to be able to sustain a lifelong that place of anxiety and just depression and self-loathing that an eating disorder puts you into. It was not sustainable lifelong. So I got to a place where I was no longer going to restrict calories for the sake of getting skinny, which led to a lot of weight gain. So then post-college, I started the whole entire, like, the Weight Watchers, the Jenny Craig, the Slim Fast. Like, I've been on all of them. I even did the ephedra, which I don't know was a craze where people thought that was the miracle drug, and it was not helpful, and it didn't work. Quite frankly, that's why I didn't stay on it. It didn't work. So then in the mid 2000s, when I really topped out at, my top number was 298 pounds. I was this close to 300 pounds. So I had gastric bypass surgery, dropped a ton of weight, got down to about 170, 180, loved it. And I was there for like 5 seconds and then started gaining weight again. Then, since then, I've just been kind of hovering, bouncing back and forth between 200, 250, 200, 250. And then the miracle drug came out, the Ozempic. And I've been on Ozempic and Mounjaro and bouncing back and forth between those. And I haven't been able to keep a steady weight down from those because every time I start to lose a little bit of weight, then my insurance changes and then I have to go off it for a time and then I gain that weight back as fast or faster than I lost it. So, Lordy child, I'm exhausted of this rat race. And at the same time, I don't want to go off of the Mounjaro that I'm on right now because I am too tired and too old to comfortably live at 250 pounds. It's too much weight for my frame. And so I'm still kind of stuck in this place of I don't want to be that weight. And if I'm being really honest, not only don't I want to feel 250, I don't want to look 250. And anybody who grew up in the 80s is lying if they're telling you that they want to lose weight solely for the health purposes. They just are. So I'm calling you out, y'all. If you grew up in my era and you're losing weight on these drugs, it's in part because you want to look slimmer. And I don't love that, but that's my story.
Well, let's pause a second on the toxicity of adults telling little girls they need to lose weight, because when you were my age, when you and I were teenagers in high school together, you were not curvy. And I know that you felt like you were curvy. You were not curvy. And whoever's telling you needed to lose weight to be on TV was just being an ass. I mean, to be frank about it, and I think you know that now. But that was so toxic because you were not big. You were the lead in most of our school plays, which had singing and dancing, and you were as thin as anybody up there, not curvy. So I think this.
But that wasn't the only voice telling me, though. There were multiple voices that were telling me that I was too big for certainly too big for television, but also just too big in general. I got teased all the time for my weight by the school bullies.
You had bullies who were going to pick on anything that they could find, but it was not because it was not accurate about your weight. I was with you. I grew up with you. It was not accurate. And I think you've come to terms with some of that, but the fact that you still referred to yourself as curvy since you hit puberty is not accurate. So just want to put that out there from my perspective.
Okay. Since we're being real. There is a picture of me at Grandma and Grandpa's house in one of those god-awful dresses that we had to wear when we were traveling. And I was probably at the time like 10 or 11. And the dress went like this. And your dress went like this. And my dress went like this. And
Okay.
and we got home from Donut Summer. So we used to go to Grandma and Grandpa's house for the summer. And when I say summer, it was usually like 2 weeks, I think, but it felt like the whole summer to us. And Gramps loved to spoil us, and so he would bring us I loved donuts, loved them. And so he would spoil us and bring us to the donut shop every single day, and we would get a dozen donuts every single day and finish those donuts. And I think you and Gramps each had like one, maybe two.
I liked a donut.
And all the rest of the donuts I made sure to eat throughout the whole entire rest of the day. And when we got home from what I think was 2 weeks of vacation, it became a thing because Mom and Dad were not happy at how much weight I had gained during Donut Summer. So starting with Donut Summer, I have been battling not only weight, but the messages that I received from the world, from everybody in the world about my weight.
Well, I think we should get to that because one of the reasons we're talking about it now is that message is getting worse. But I'm going to put that aside just for a second, though, and talk about Donut Summer, which we joked about. This is our family lore. This is our history together. I feel like there was also a piece in it, besides the donuts being very, very delicious. There was also a piece in it that if someone got you something, you had to eat it. You were being a polite people pleaser.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, I loved those donuts. So, okay. Since we're talking real, when I was maybe even 6, Mom would put out enough food for us to make our own cereals in the morning. So she'd put out the bowl, and then she'd put out the cereal, and then she'd put out the little bowl full of sugar, and then she would put out the milk, and then she would also sometimes put out Hershey's syrup, Hershey's chocolate syrup, to put in our milk so we could have chocolate milk. And after a time, she learned that chocolate milk probably wasn't the best choice for us, so we were still allowed to have chocolate milk, but only 1 glass of it. We could refill as much milk as we wanted, but we could only have 1 glass of chocolate milk. So what I figured out was that if I had a glass of chocolate milk, I could drink down half the chocolate milk and then put more milk in it because we were allowed to do that. And then I would have a glass and a half of what was chocolate milk. I was addicted to food and sugar since as early as I could open my eyes. So my whole entire life, if I had the opportunity to get a sweet, I was going to take it. So no, I've been addicted to foods and sugars my whole life.
Okay. I won't argue with you on that. It's your experience for sure. When we talk about the 70s dresses, though, the ones that went like this, that was the style. And I was 2 years younger. If you were 10 and I was 8 years old, I was a little girl. I was a tiny little girl. So I don't think we can compare what we both looked like. And to be very frank, after Donut Summer, and I can taste those donuts right now. Gramps' whatever donut shop he went to, I think it might have been Hi Let's Eat or something like that.
It was Winchell's.
Winchell's.
It was called Winchell's.
I can taste those donuts today. But it wasn't long after Donut Summer that I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And the paradigm back then was type 1 diabetics cannot eat sugar unless there's an insulin reaction or a low blood sugar, in which case I had to eat sugar, very confusing. But I was prohibited from even having sugared gum, which has, 2 grams of sugar. It's ridiculous. But back then, for probably 20 years, I did not eat sugar ever. So we diverged in our experiences from Donut Summer, because I feel like in Donut Summer, I was probably already diabetic and just not diagnosed yet. So I think the comparison between you and me is not, it's not useful.
I'm sorry. I didn't really mean to compare you against me. What I was comparing was that photograph, the only other person I had in that time frame and with that same dress was my picture and your picture. And in my memory, you never got to the size that I was in that picture. Like, that picture to me was just like, but it's not just the picture. It was all the messages that came with the picture.
We did often have identical dresses. Lore. That wasn't very fair.
Yeah, well, yeah. But it was all of it. It was the lore, it was the messaging, it was also the period of time when mom was reading up about nutrition and food, and she was starting to kind of catch on. So I remember, you don't remember this, but when we were really, really little, we could have Fruit Loops, and we could have they called them Sugar Smacks at the time. And then she read an article in the Reader's Digest, God damn that Reader's Digest, that said that sugar cereals are really bad for your kids. And we were on Cheerios and Kix for the rest of our lives.
They were cardboard cereals, but we had the bowl of sugar that we could put on top of it.
We could put some sugar on top of it. It was the only way that we were going to eat it after eating Sugar Smacks and Corn Pops. But the fact that mom was at that point, and this was young enough that you don't even remember having the sugar cereals, but the fact that she was so attuned to healthy eating, but also she didn't really like to cook. So the choices that we had for food were so limited. And I'm not blaming this on mom. This has nothing to do with mom. But from very, very young, I always felt a scarcity of food. I always felt like there wasn't going to be enough food that I wanted. Not just, we had plenty of food, but we didn't have all the sweets and the treats, and we didn't have all of those things. And so anytime I had an opportunity to go for those, I would. And anytime a teenage girl in the 80s ate sweets, it was a big fucking deal. People would call you out on it, and should you be eating that much, and are you sure you don't want to watch your figure, and all of the things, and then you'd go to PE, and the PE, the gym teachers were constantly getting on girls to exercise more. Okay, since I'm on my rant about this, we had multiple sessions where the gym was split into the boys' classes and the girls' classes. And the boys would go and play basketball, or they would go and they would play soccer. And the girls would do aerobics or jazzercise. We weren't allowed to just go play a sport and get exercise doing something fun. We had to do aerobics. And the jazzercise in the 80s, it was all about things like I must increase my bust, right? There were mantras to help us to learn which parts of our body were not okay the way they were, and which parts of our bodies we had to work on. They would do these, you'd go on hands and knees, and then you'd kick your leg up like this because you needed to tighten your glutes. This was the environment we grew up in. It is no surprise to me that even today we still have horrible messages about food and body image. And I will say, I was very pleased in the 2010s to about the 2018, 2020, somewhere in there, we had this reformation where curves were in, where flat butts were out, and kind of a little bit of booty was in, where plus size models didn't even call them plus size models anymore. And honestly, so a plus size model in our day was like a size 6, because they weren't a 0. Plus size models in the 2010s were more like 12, 14, which is still pretty normal. It's a pretty typical, but at least we were moving in the right direction. And then it's gotten worse again.
I remember in that era, I noticed when Target stopped having the regular sized section and I think they called it women's wear, which is the 14, 16, 18, 20. And they just made it all one shop. And I remember that. I'm like, that's more appropriate. You don't want to have to go to a different style or a different part of the store just because you're a different size. That doesn't make sense.
You know what, though? Even with Target, They still did, though. They just didn't call it ladies and women's, because that's what it was. Ladies were normal because they're ladies, and then women were like, women. What they did was they made brands. So the
Mm.
Ava and Viv brand was your 12 to 20s or 14 to 20s. So even in Target, even though there weren't these giant signs on the ceiling, you knew, if you were a plus size person like I was, that if you wanted to shop at Target, I had to go to the Ava and Viv section. But you're right, it was starting to shift.
It was starting to shift.
And we were starting to see models. So what it used to be when I was a kid, plus size clothing catalogs, because that's how we found clothing back then, had skinny models modeling the plus size clothing. So we never really could tell what it was going to actually look like on the size of body that the clothing were made in. Now at least they have models in the size of the clothing modeling the clothing. So I can walk into a Lane Bryant and I can look at the models and I can kind of see what that's going to look like on my body. And that's new.
That's progress.
So I'm still pleased that we're making that progress. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today that's been really weighing on me is this. There seems to be this brand new wave of ultra thin, which outpaces the thin of the 80s, which I didn't think was possible. But I am starting to see a celebrity culture of women that look like they have anorexia. And they probably do. And it's fallen so out of fashion to comment on women's bodies. But I kind of think we need to start to call out again that is not helpful to the culture. It's not helpful to young girls or young boys for that matter. And I think that us pretending like it's not a thing is also not helpful. I think we have to start calling it out, and not to blame the women who are too thin, but to blame the culture that is allowing this and not we're not looking out for these young women. Quite frankly, these young women are literally starving themselves to where they may die of this. And because we've gotten to this place where we can't call out, we can't talk about women's bodies, we haven't been talking about it.
I want to take a broader view, just to start the conversation about about the abuses today. I want to take a broader view on the uptake or the upswing of GLP-1s or of weight loss drugs. I've heard a theory. No, actually it's my own theory, so I'll take credit. I'll take responsibility.
If you are liking the content, please like and subscribe, comment, and invite a friend to listen in. Thank you.
I have a theory about why right now we're seeing all of these successful weight loss drugs being used by women. And that is, if you look back 30 years, 35, 40 years, women didn't really have their own money or their own ability to invest in or have anyone invest in drugs for female problems. And I'm going to just say straight up that obesity in women is a much more of a social problem than obesity in men. You know, the dad bod, the cute, whatever. It's much more of a women's issue. Women's issue were not addressed in research and science. They just weren't. And now, as women are sort of gaining their more autonomy and they have more money to spend, the medical community is now behind it, saying, oh, you know what, we can actually sell this to women who have their own money now. So I feel like this revolution and evolution in female empowerment has led to research for women's health issues, and it led to this thing that is so easily abused right now. The weight loss drugs, the GLP-1s, all of those are essentially made for two reasons. One, because they know they can make money off of it now, and two, because there are people who have metabolic things that need to be corrected. I think you are the classic case of a person who benefits from this medication. You are who they're building it for. The fact that it's being abused is really a societal issue. And again, I agree with you. We don't blame the women who are ultra skinny and just bones who are on the weight loss drugs. It is a societal problem. And because we can't talk about it, because we can't talk about women's bodies, or we're respectful enough not to, we're not only harming those women who are taking the drugs, but harming those girls who are looking at these people saying they're famous, I want to be famous, and therefore I need to be that skinny. And it's a real problem.
I think it is a real problem. And the language around it has shifted. So we don't talk about women being anorexic, and we don't talk about women being too skinny, but apparently there's language like yoga body or things like that, or Pilates. I think it's Pilates bod, which is just code for really, really fucking skinny. And when you couch it in flowery language like that, it makes it like that's an ideal to aspire to. Whereas when we started talking about anorexia being anorexia, it hits different. Like it feels like I don't want that, right? I don't want to do that. But this flowery language around it, and this kind of cultural, like, oh my God, look at me, culture that you especially see on TikTok and Instagram, I think it's really, really harmful. And then as soon as we talk about it, we kind of get pushed back with, you can't talk about women's bodies. But I do actually think that that's shifting too, because I am hearing more and more conversation online about, like, this is not okay. We don't want our beloved celebrity women to die of this. We don't want them harmed by this.
What is the allure of having a Pilates body? Is it that you're wealthy enough to go and spend hours doing Pilates in the middle of the day? Is it your discipline that you're able to go get Pilates body and go 5 times a week, 6 times a week, whatever it is? Or is it that you really want to look like you're super skinny? Or is it a combination of all of those three?
I think it's a combination. I honestly think that the very fact that if you have all morning to go and spend at Pilates is itself a flex.
Right. Right. So I was raising a daughter in California, and one of the reasons I didn't want to move to LA and that I actually moved to a different country is this pressure of having to look a certain way and to be judged so quickly for what one looks like. My daughter's gorgeous. She would have no trouble competing in California for being the most gorgeous, but I didn't want her putting value on what she looks like above everything else in her life. So I've left largely not because of that, but that was a huge benefit of us leaving, was that she's not going to be competing just for what people look like. But as a celebrity, I think that's your currency, is what you look like.
Yeah, I don't think that we want to encourage our celebrities to continue down this path. Not just for our sake, but for theirs.
And for the little girl's sake. When they're looking up to these women.
Yeah.
There have been trends in the past, and the sort of the miracle cures and the miracle weight loss things that I remember. Tab, which was cyclamates, which is saccharin, and very soon we figured out that saccharin was carcinogenic. It caused cancer, and so that kind of came and went, and we went to aspartame, which they haven't really proved causes cancer, but it's it's fake sugar. And then we went through the trend of what was it called? There were potato chips that had no fat in them. Olean?
Oh, olean. Yeah, something like olean.
And then they very quickly found out that eating those potato chips gave you explosive diarrhea. So that didn't go very far. But these GLP-1s have been on the market for a while and are easy to get. We can write to somebody who's not even our own doctor and get a prescription for them. They're starting to combine different mechanisms of action, but this is taking off. This is huge, and so far we haven't run into any major issues that means they're going to be off the market soon, or they're going to be out of popularity soon. So maybe the major issue that's going to stop it and turn it around is that we start seeing deaths from malnutrition.
I hope that's not the thing that turns it around.
Well,
I hope it's these conversations that nip it in the bud before we get to that point that turn it around. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation today, because it's really important for people, especially. I was thinking about this. A lot of the people's voices that I'm hearing were people who grew up in the early 2000s and remember that wave of skinny. And I want to say, having grown up in the 80s, the skinny 2000s wave was nothing like the 80s skinny wave. And the 80s skinny wave is nothing like the 2026 skinny wave. This is unprecedented. Even growing up. But what I wanted to say is that I think it's super critical that we hear voices from all of the generations who were impacted by growing up in those eras. And we have a very particular perspective, having grown up in the 80s, on what this can do lifelong if we don't start to turn this around again.
You mentioned a little while ago that when you were younger, you wished you had anorexia. And
Yeah.
I believe these weight loss drugs are medically induced anorexia that don't
Yeah.
require any kind of willpower to not eat or to vomit or whatever is happening. It's just medically induced anorexia in people who don't need weight loss. We do our best to lay the problems out. There's no claiming here that you and I can solve any of these problems. We just want to discuss it and open up dialogue about it. I do believe, though, that there is room to place accountability. And I think maybe that's a place that we can start right now. So I feel like holding the women who are taking these GLP-1s and getting way, way too skinny, that's probably the least place that I would put accountability. Or the little
Agreed.
girls who look up to very famous people who are wasting away and just skin and bones, I wouldn't hold them accountable either. I would hold accountable the pharma companies. I would hold accountable the doctors who are writing prescriptions for people that they've never even seen in their office and never even laid eyes on. I think that's a huge accountability right there. It resembled a little bit the opioid epidemic, where it was just, you can have this, without looking at the dangers of a person who doesn't need it taking that drug. I think we need to look at societal norms. We need to look at the media and what the media are displaying as beauty and fame worthiness. And the media, as well as the whole patriarchy, expecting women to be anything that they're not right now. So if it were acceptable for women to be large, then women would be wrong for being skinny. So it's almost this, back to this patriarchal system that we had, that whatever women are doing right now is wrong. And in order to control women, we have to tell them that they're wrong, they're ugly, they're the wrong size, they're the wrong shape, they're wearing the wrong makeup, because then they're going to spend more money and start spinning their wheels trying to do better and not actually fight patriarchy. Boy, was
I
that
think
dark?
there's
Was that dark enough? Did I go to a dark enough place on that? Jeez.
that no, but you're spot on. I mean, you named all of the things. And I think that one of the biggest challenges, with which is why I think skinny keeps becoming the thing, is because if a woman is literally starving to death, there is no energy to fight the patriarchy, or to fight capitalism, or to fight domestic violence. Like, if we're physically small and energetically lacking, we're so much easier to control. And that's why I think skinny keeps coming around. That's why I think that this, I feel like in 2026 there's been this push, and actually probably closer to 2025. Yeah, 2025, 2026, there has been this massive push to get women out of culture, out of politics, out of medicine, out of the higher positions of education, out of all of those arenas. We're trying to push women out and push them back into the home, because we're easier to control when we're in the home. And making us small is going to make that easier to do. I think the most insidious thing that I didn't see until this wave of it is how internalized we have made it. Like, I knew back in the 80s that the problem was probably my perception as much as it was the culture. But now I see it so, so clearly that there is a concerted effort to make women feel like they are less than if they are not super skinny, or they are less than if they are not living the trad wife life. Okay, I called it out. There it is. And I think that us buying into that and perpetuating it is hugely problematic. And it is the other women pushing this that I find the most distasteful. Like, I get that I'm not excusing it, but I get why men would do this. I don't understand why women would want to do this to each other.
I'm going to push back on one thing that you said. When I was at my highest weight, I felt also the very weakest I felt in my life, just about. So it's not just about making us weaker by making us smaller. I think it's more complicated than that. Because we could also be considered
Fair.
weaker. We're weaker, but we're less valuable to men as bigger women.
But part of the reason that we're less valuable is because they want to push us in the direction of smaller, taking up less space, physically taking up less space, because we shouldn't be taking up space in the boardroom, and we shouldn't be taking up space in the C-suites. And
This actually makes me want to laugh that people actually believe these things about women who are thoughtful and considered and intellectually curious and critically thinking and caring about equity and supporting like life itself. And that you don't want the people who are this qualified to be in the boardroom and in the politics. It's just so funny to me that this short-sightedness of women can't contribute because they're so qualified to contribute.
in just like 2 generations since women started to have more rights, every metric has gotten better until this new push of patriarchy. But we had better education, better healthcare outcomes, better, the economy was better. All of these things were better when women did better. Everyone does better when everyone does better. And this push to patriarchy is it's a rending of people from one another.
I can see that patriarchs won't agree that we all did better with women contributing more because it depends on what that one person finds valuable. If it's about equity and that one person feels like they're no longer the one on top of the heap, they're going to feel like they're not doing better, even if as society we're doing better.
Yes, but that's the thing. Societally, we were doing better as long as everybody was doing better. And I think the point you're trying to make is that the men who felt like they were on top, who now have to share that space, feel like they've been they've been put upon.
Right.
But it's not accurate. It's just their perception.
Yes.
The reality is they still had better access to housing and better access to healthcare and all of those things when everybody had access to everything. And they just personally felt slighted because they were no longer above other people, and they don't like that. And so now they want to be above other people again. The rest of us who are not those people, we're stronger together and we're more powerful together. And that's why it's so painful to me to see other women pushing this skinny narrative, because it's just eating ourselves from the inside. Like, we should be supporting each other and wanting to uplift all body types and all, but I also think that is a handful of privileged women who are feeling that luxury of being over someone else, and also don't want to lose that by lifting up everybody else.
What were you talking about?
Who am I talking about?
Mm-hmm.
The influencers. The influencer culture.
Okay, so you're saying sometimes people will become that very, very skinny person because they want that power over other people.
Yeah, and then by belittling women who aren't attaining that, they are keeping themselves on top. They're portraying that the skinny ideal is what we should all aspire to, but only a select few actually have attained, and therefore they are better than everybody else. And they get attention for that, and the time and attention also leads to money. And so the influencers are making a lot of money by putting by belittling the people who aren't attaining what they're attaining. And it's just, I guess I'm saying is, the women influencers who are pushing this narrative are no better than the patriarchy, and they're maybe you could probably say it's part of the patriarchy.
I would say that because I want to go back to my point that the women influencers who are super skinny are, I would say they're not the accountable party that we need to hold accountable. It's something so much bigger than that. It's the messages that they got as a child and the messages they're getting right now, that I'll give you money if you become a stick figure. It's all of that. I don't think it's entirely these women who are doing this.
No, correct. I wouldn't put all of the blame on them, but I do think that we need to be calling out their participation in it.
Okay, in the broader context of trying to solve the overall problem, which is that
Yes.
bodies are different and that's the right thing. And that there's
Yeah.
so much more to qualify a person. Or we don't even have to judge people, but removing the judgment of people because of what their body looks like, that's such a shallow and useless metric.
Yeah, and it's always been there, and even and as we start to make progress away from that, that I feel like as we made that progress in the 2010s, that's when we started to get the pushback,
Right.
because we were starting to actually make progress. And I really feel like when the marginalized start to gain power, wealth, equity, that's when the people who actually have the power and wealth are going to push back and try to make that not a thing anymore. There's a YouTuber that I follow who goes by Knitting Cult Lady, and she talks about cults. She grew up in a cult. And one of the hallmarks of a good cult is that they have what she calls the skinny white woman. And the role of the skinny white woman in a cult is to whitewash the abuses of the people in power. So that if you have a skinny white woman who's standing in proximity to power, then the rest of the masses can look to that skinny white woman and say, well, look, she's saying that this is all okay, so therefore it has to be okay. Because she's just like me, even though she's not. She's the skinny white woman in proximity to power. And so this is the whole thing with Erica Kirk, I think, is that and let me just say, I was never a fan of Charlie Kirk. And at the same time, I thought that he was authentically himself. Like, I think he really truly believed all of the bullshit that he was spewing. I don't think that Erica Kirk believes it. But she's the skinny white woman that is now selling it. And it's making other women look and say, oh, well, look, she's doing just great. She's doing great. And she's telling me that the trad wife life is the thing I should be aspiring to. And she's got power and she's got money and equity and she's happy. Therefore, I should become a trad wife, which is exactly the opposite of what she's actually doing with her life. Because the skinny white woman is saying it.
It's the overall problem of only listening to the sound bites and only listening to the outside surface of the issue, right? Looking at Erica Kirk promoting a trad wife. She's not even married right now. I never see her with her children. She's out traveling and working all the time. She's not anything close to a trad wife right now, and yet that's what she's trying to embody as the right thing for other women to do. So if you look down one layer, not even complicated, look down one layer, she's promoting something she's unwilling to do herself.
And for some reason, we don't ever seem to make that connection. That the skinny white woman is rarely actually a model of the thing that they're trying to tell us we should become.
Right. Right.
But it's a hallmark of cultish behavior. And right now I would absolutely say that the patriarchy that we're sort of under their thumb right now is very cult-like.
Yes, and there are plenty of skinny white women who are put up in front of the men to take the bullets, the figurative bullets.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, all of the people in Trump's administration who took the hit first were the skinny white women.
Right.
Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem and Tulsi Gabbard. They're the first ones to get when things go down.
Right.
They're the ones that take the hits to protect. They're the shield in front of the men in power.
So what's going on with Susie Wiles? She's not the skinny white woman puppet. She's in there doing her stuff.
I think okay, that's a really good question. So I think she is the skinny white woman. She's just been it for so long that she's no longer skinny and she's no longer young. But I think so I think all of the skinny white women are doing it because they believe that their proximity to power gives them power. And for a time, it kind of mimics that. It looks like they do have some power. So someone like Susie Wiles has probably learned enough to keep enough in the background that she's not going to be the first one to take the hit because she's not that public of a figure or hasn't been. But I think if she were around long enough, she would eventually be one of the people to take the hit.
I really love how we're doing our podcast and you're whispering one piece of it. Like you don't want the world to know what we're saying. They're going to know. They're going to hear it. It's going to be out there. It's going in the world.
Yeah.
If we decide.
Mean, that's what I kind of like, but I feel like that, right? Like I feel like some of this conversation, it feels
subversive.
Oh, thank you. This feels like the conversation that if we were to continue down this road of semi-fascism, of illiberal democracy, that these would be the conversations that you and I would get in trouble for.
Right.
I don't think we're going to get there because I think that we're in a different time. And I do feel enough pushback that I don't think we're going to get to like that level of us as privileged white women taking the hit. And I think that that's all the more reason why we should be putting our necks out there.
I'm completely in favor of that. This is one of the reasons we do this. One is to grow, and one's because I love spending time with you, but also because who else is going to put themselves in trouble or at risk to try to get moving in the right direction? I feel like that's a gift that we can give, or that we have for each other to bring people along.
Yeah, I agree.
So I had a conversation with two moms yesterday, and one of the moms was recommending, or had said to the other mom, that they saw this movie Ladies First, and they kind of said to me, "Oh, have you seen it?" I said, "Oh, we did a podcast on it," and I wanted to hear what their reaction was, and they said, "Oh, it was a cute little rom-com. It was kind of just a silly little movie." And in my head, I'm like, no, this was an offense to women. And and I started saying things like that, how it wasn't matriarchy, it was just patriarchy. We're reversed like Freaky Friday, and I provided my opinion, and they both kind of looked at me. We were sitting in front of a hockey game, right? So it wasn't like a serious philosophical dinner party, whatever. We're just having a good time. And they both looked at me just with like this tiny, tiny sliver of, are you taking the joy out of everything? And so I took a step back and I'm like, okay, am I taking the joy out of everything? Am I assigning everything to patriarchy and misogyny and all of this? And I thought about it. And I was damn right that's what I'm doing, because that's what's going on. That's exactly what's going on. And if we're not willing to say it when that's the truth, then I don't think we have a right to a podcast. Because I asked myself, am I in an echo chamber talking about misogyny and talking about patriarchy and how that's affecting everything? And I realized, no, I'm not in that echo chamber. I'm listening to multiple sources, and I'm looking at the world, and I'm digging past the first layer, and I'm seeing that, no, this is actually what's going on. And therefore, I think it's worth it, and that we are responsible for calling it out.
And I think that women like us are, in a sense, taking a hit in that we are more immersed in it, I think, than a lot of other people. And that's probably what you were feeling with these other women, is they were just watching a movie and it seems fun and silly. But because you and I are so immersed in it, it's going to feel a lot more like this is all there is. So I want to make 2 points about that. First, I'm more than happy to be that woman that is fully immersed in it and to keep talking about it, because if I say it 10 times and someone else hears it once, then I need to say it 100 times for them to hear it 10 times before it sinks in. So I'm cool with that. The other thing is, I do think that we as women who are immersed in it have to be very intentional about finding joy in things that happen in life. And I think that we do. I don't think that you and I suck every ounce of joy out of everything that happens just because we're aware of the patriarchy. I think we're both incredibly intentional about making sure that we find joy and that we acknowledge it when it happens.
I completely agree. I definitely do that. Yeah. And if I find a moment of joy, I share it with you. I just text you, this is a moment of joy.
Yes,
as nerdy
yes,
as that
which
is.
You just did this weekend. You were just like, this is amazing and my life is great. So yeah, I think we have to have both. I think the one other piece that I really think that we should address as we're talking about the topic of weight loss and GLP-1s and the anorexic celebrity culture that we're seeing, is that I acknowledge that there is like what it feels to me like a talking out both sides of my mouth when I'm talking about how much I hate the culture that is expecting women to be skinny, and at the same time I'm taking the GLP-1 because I don't want to be fat. So I just want to put out there that I acknowledge that there's still enough inside me myself that I do not feel comfortable at 250 pounds, both for health but also for looks. And so I don't have a solution to the problem. But I also don't think that my taking a GLP-1 at my current health, weight, and age is contributing to a culture of anorexia. If I was at 130 pounds and still taking GLP-1s, I think that it would be a different conversation we'd be having right now.
I agree.
So I feel like there's just got to be a balance. So I don't think that I'm saying that nobody should ever be on this, but I am saying that that there's a sliver of the population that is abusing what is actually really good and healthy for a lot of us in such a way that it's actually making the problem worse, not better.
Well said. There's something I've noticed about our podcast, that we are going to contradict ourselves, and we're going to be fighting against things that we also participate in. That's going to happen because we are sharing our thoughts, and we are fighting our own healing journeys, and we were given the toxic messages when we were little. We're digging past the first surface level of these conversations, and therefore, as we go through this journey of discovery ourselves, we're going to be contradicting ourselves and maybe talking out of both sides of our mouth. Perhaps it would look like that. But really, we're just going through this with everybody else, and that's going to happen, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
The way that I look at it is that that we're fighting to swim upstream, but we're still in the water.
Right.
Like we're living in the culture that we're striving so hard to fight against, and so we're not going to do it perfectly. But I also think that doesn't mean that we don't get a voice.
Of course it doesn't mean that.
And I think one of the messages that we used to get is that unless you're gonna be part of the solution, you don't have a voice in the problem. And I want to say, no, I think that we all have to have a voice, because speaking about it is part of the solution. And so I reject any voice that says, well, you're on the GLP-1, so you don't get to talk about it. No, I think I get to talk about it more than anybody because I'm on the GLP-1, because I'm like up to here in the water. And so I absolutely get to have a voice, and I'm going to use it in this way.
We're talking from a significant place of authority and vulnerability, and we're gaining the knowledge as we go. All of those things are true.
And this is why I like us too, because we're nuanced.
Yes, we're nuanced.
I think that I'm talking to the women who are afraid to use their voice because they haven't got it all solved yet, and are still kind of hearing that message like, well, if you're not going to be part of the solution, then you can't have a voice in the problem. Those are the women I'm talking to right now. Like, you can still be struggling through how to work this out and use your voice at the same time.
Telling someone, unless they have all the answers, they don't have the right to a voice, is oppression. That's what that is.
That's what that is. That's patriarchy. And oppression.
Speak your mind, sister. Coming soon on Super Random Things with those sisters.
It used to be more defined, where when you were on vacation, you were unreachable. Now that we can be reached like 24/7 with our phones, I kind of wonder, like, why do I want to go all the way to another country just to do all the work that I would still be doing if I was at home? So I think that's probably one of the problems that we have right now with being so connected, is that we have lost our ability to disconnect, and we don't step away from our real life anymore. And I think that's a problem.
I think I have another level of that problem, and that is that I frequently do step away from my life. I'm an active parent. I do a lot of parenting, a lot of hours of parenting, but I feel so guilty every time I'm not in my office doing stuff for the entire day. Like if my car breaks down and I have to go take care of that, that could take 3, 4 hours in a day. And I don't sort of work until 3 o'clock in the morning to make up for that. But then I punish myself for being gone from the office. But this is what life should be, is this good balance and an ability to step away and disconnect and then come back refreshed and ready to get some stuff done in a more efficient way. Hey, Asma, do you like your mom's content?
I do. Do you like it, Kiwi?
I really do. I like my mom's content.
It's amazing.
Hey, like and subscribe, please.
Like and subscribe.